I love chronographs. The complication of a mechanical timer was such an achievement. If you have about 2,000 buckaroos and you've got an itch for a watch with some extra pushers, this what I call mid-tier price range is admittedly a little awkward. You're starting to get above the price of most micro brands, but we're still a little shy of even entry Swiss names like Longines. This is the area where a couple of countries shine, specifically the Americans and the Germans. So in this video, I found 5 chronographs in around the $2,000 range. Let's get into it. The Hamilton intra-matic chrono has always been one of my favorite chronographs to recommend to someone as their first serious chronograph. It mixes classic design with superb finishing. Now, Hamilton used to be a 100-year-old American company, but now it's part of the Swatch Group. But still, it's a name that conjures up the early days of American watchmaking. Hamilton was there in 1969 when the first automatic chronograph movements were almost simultaneously released by the likes of Zenith, Seiko, Breitling. Today, Hamilton makes a few versions of the intra-matic, but the most classic to me has always been the hand-wound Panda bicompacts that they call the Chronograph H. The grandfather of this chronograph traces way back to the 70s, alongside names like the Heuer Carrera, the Rolex Paul Newman Daytona. Now, you can't really argue with the design here. It's the tried and true Panda chronograph. The contrasting subdials give an immediately recognizable design from a mile away. There are also plenty of vintagey details like a hint of faux patina in the lume, as well as a tall box sapphire crystal. It is a hand-wound movement called the H51. It's a Valjoux-based movement with the automatic works removed, and it runs at 4 Hz, 60 hours of power. The Chronograph H is a deceptive watch. It hides its 14.5mm height really well. On a darker leather strap, this becomes one of the most versatile looks you can get. A watch that you can wear with anything. But if that Panda look is played out to you and you want something a bit more edgy, well, Hamilton just dropped a trio of black murdered out intramatics, and I'm intrigued. The design of the new chronographs is said to be inspired by auto racing, and indeed, the dials of these watches look like dash displays on a race car, with matte black backgrounds and a bright yellow chrono hand. They come in orange, yellow, and white, but all achieve this dramatic high contrast look. There is corresponding tachymeter inboard of the crystal that's matched to the same color, and a black date wheel hidden at the 6. Paired with the leather strap with a similar color accent embedded in it, you get a very automotive vibe. This watch reminds me a lot of the Porsche design chronograph. Remember the watch that Tom Cruise wore in Top Gun? That was actually the first all-black PVD watch released to the world, and also had an orange chrono hand. PVD, or powder vapor deposition, adheres a thin layer of black coating over the metal surface. There is a newer technique called DLC that's supposed to be a little more durable. As far as I can tell, this Hamilton still uses PVD. Now, you might think that this is the same Hamilton case as the Chrono H, just PVD coated, but you'd be wrong. The blacked out version is actually an automatic and thus uses a slightly different case design. Instead of a box sapphire, the crystal actually sits flush with the bezel, slightly domed. This achieves a more modern look, but does make the watch feel just a little bit taller, even though their effective height is the same. You'll have to decide if the trade-off is worth it. I mean, you're getting an automatic H31 movement, but it sits taller on the wrist. Another difference to consider is that the automatic watch has a screw-down crown and the hand-wound doesn't. It doesn't gain any additional water resistance, both at 100 meters, but I'd usually trust a screw-down crown more if I'm gonna get anywhere near the water. But it does make sense not to put a screw-down crown in a hand-wound watch because that would get pretty annoying. In any case, they're both thick watches. In fact, anything with this Valjoux-derived movement will be, and at this price range, that's sort of the only game in town. That's a shame because it kind of precludes the use of a NATO strap, because a typical dual pass NATO will put this watch at 17 millimeters high, for God's sakes. Luckily, that leads us to our big announcement. The Anachronist shop just got our zero pass strap in black PVD for all your black watch needs. Black ripped nylon, black hardware, matte black, everything. If you haven't heard of the Zero Pass, it took me 3 years to design and bring this to the market with the help of David at the Strap Tailor. Strap looks just like a NATO for all intents and purposes, but our patent pending design reroutes the material that would normally go underneath the watch to around your wrist so that the watch sits naked against your skin like God intended. If you hate the way NATOs wear, you should definitely give the Zero Pass a try. Now let's cross the pond and see what the Germans have brought to the battle. The Sinn watch company was founded in 1966 by a former World War II pilot, and that's why the Sinn 356 looks to be lifted straight from a bomber's instrument panel. It looks like a mess of numbers and markers, but somehow there's an order to the madness. They even found room for artful touches like syringe hands and a framed double day-date window. It's very monochromatic of a look, just like the Speedmaster, which means that this is a strap monster. But I still prefer the Sinn on a stock H-link bracelet. However, if you ever adjusted a Sinn bracelet, it requires 2 Allen wrenches, and it makes you wonder if everybody at Sinn completed a surgical residency. But once adjusted, it really extends the watch's character. Everything has a bead blasted finish, no polish anywhere, making it feel extremely rugged. But if you look at the proportions of the 356 on paper, it has a devastating Achilles heel. The watch stands at a full 15.5 millimeters tall, but is just 38.5 wide, which I think keeps a lot of people from even considering this watch. But this watch is a big liar on paper. On the wrist, it wears wider and thinner. Wider because it's got crown guards and pushers that extend the case. Thinner because much of that height is attributable to a high domed acrylic crystal. And I really don't mind acrylic. It adds a nice warmth and distortion to the package. Just keep a tube of poly watch around and you'll be fine. Choose the Sinn if you want a dose of military heritage with your chronograph. Now, completely switching gears, but staying German, look at the Yunhan's Maxbill chronograph. This one is for the artistes and designers in the room. Named after Maxbill, who was an original trainee of the Bauhaus school, you know, the guys that gave us minimalist design and IKEA furniture. The Maxbill line oozes that mid-century modern vibe. Great use of negative space on the dial with open subdials at the 12 and 6, a day-date window at the 3 and script at the 9 to create both some symmetry without being repetitive. The black dial printing is highly contrasted with the white eggshell background, and its sans serif typography will make any design student need an underwear change. This version has a PVD case, but there's also the original with a polished steel. Either way, the Maxbill case is 14.5 millimeters thick. See a trend here? Because it has a Valjoux-derived movement in it. But the case is the saucer shape, tapering towards the edges to hide that height extremely well. This, with added stubby little lugs, gives this 40 millimeter watch only a 42 lug to lug. There are also stylized pump pushers that give a great click. People always say that column wheels feel better, but I swear I can't tell much of a difference with this cam-operated Valjoux. Last on our list is an oldie but goodie. We're talking about a Speedmaster. Now, what's a Speedmaster doing in a $2,000 watch video? Well, I'm talking about the neo-vintage Speedy Reduced. The Speedy Reduced was produced in the 90s, 2000s, were basically a smaller version of the Speedmaster with an automatic movement. They sold a ton of them, especially in the Japanese market, so they're pretty ubiquitous, and there are many special editions to look out for. The Speedy Reduced stands at 38.5 millimeters wide by 12 millimeters thick with a lug-to-lug of under 45. So let that sink in for a bit. Every chronograph we've looked at so far has been over 14 millimeters. How the hell did they achieve 12 mil 20 years ago with an automatic chronograph? Well, here's the catch. The Reduced uses a de Bras chronograph module on top of an ETA movement. An extremely efficient use of space, but also poses a challenge when it comes to servicing. So just be aware, if you get a Reduced, budget a couple $100 extra when it comes to time for servicing. Otherwise, the Reduced is a godsend for people with smaller wrists. If you have like a sub 6.5, 6-inch wrist, I think you'll love the Reduced. There are a few visual differences. The Reduced has subdials spread slightly further apart across the dial. It also has a president-style bracelet that starts at 18 millimeters at the lugs. Now, early Speedy Reduced had a acrylic, or what Omega calls Hezolite crystal, with later ones sporting sapphire. And don't let the snobs tell you that this isn't a real Speedmaster. Whoever says that, just ask them if their personal watch actually went to the moon. I personally found the Speedy Reduced an economical way of getting into a Speedy with its own distinct heritage and character. So if you have a $2,000 budget, which of these 5 chronographs do you think has your name on it? Or is there one that I missed? If you want to continue the chat, hop on over to the Anachronist Discord with us. The link is in the description. See you guys next time.